Hello and welcome back to another episode of the DIYguy.net.
Alright, today we're going to show you how to replace your alternator on your H6 Outback or Tribeca. This one's got a bad bearing, so we're going to replace it to quiet it down. And we want to replace it before it actually locks up or seizes up and causes the belt to slip and burning the belt or the belt to break. Alright, so the first thing we need to do is come over to our battery and remove the positive side terminal. This one's an aftermarket one, so it's going to be a 13 millimeter. The stock Subaru one should be a 10 millimeter. Alright, so when we get that terminal off, you can go ahead and tuck it behind the battery. You want to make sure it doesn't pop up and retouch the terminal on the battery. So we're going to go ahead and do that. You can also take a rag and kind of insulate the top of the terminal of the battery to make sure the cable doesn't touch it as well. Alright, so now that we got the positive terminal of the battery disconnected, tucked out of the way so it can't reconnect to the battery, you can go ahead and remove the cover off the top of the motor if you have one. This car it's missing, but there is 1, 2, 3, 4 10 millimeter bolts that hold that cover on. Alright, so now that you got the engine cover out of the way, we need to remove this air inlet here that takes air to our air box. So there'll be 1 10 millimeter bolt there and one right here. This one was rusted in the radiator support, so it's broken off, so we're only going to have to remove this one on this car. Once we get that out, we'll just pick up, pull it to the passenger side and wiggle it, and we should be able to pop it out of the inside piece where it goes through the fender. Good idea to put the bolt back in so you don't lose it. Alright, I'll move the camera a little bit closer now. Alright, so now that we got the inlet going to our air box removed, we can take that same 10 millimeter. There's a nut right here. We want to turn that a few times just to make it loose. That way we can loosen this side of that serpentine belt shroud or cover. Alright, so now that we got the 10 millimeter nut on that side loosened, we can come to this side, and there's a 12 millimeter bolt right there that we need to completely remove. Get that bolt all the way out and go ahead and swing that cover right up and over. Be careful to make sure it doesn't land on the battery positive terminal. Alright, so now that we got that serpentine belt shroud or cover flipped up and out of the way, we're going to need a 14 millimeter box wrench. You want a longer one, as you're going to have to pull the belt tensioner, which is right here below the alternator and the power steering pump. I'll move the camera a little bit closer so you can see it real quick. We're going to get that 14 millimeter wrench on there, pull it to the driver's side to create slack in the belt. Then we're going to go ahead and work the belt off. Alright, so I'll move it a little closer so you can see. Right between this power steering and the alternator, right there, is that tensioner where we need to get that 14 millimeter on and push it to the driver's side so we can create as much slack in the belt as possible to get the belt off. Alright, so our offset wrench, we want the offset going into the pulley to get as much of the wrench onto the nut or bolt as possible. We're going to go to the other side of the car here. Alright, so we're ready to take the belt off now. Depending on how new your belt is and how much it's stretched, you may want to loosen the other alternator bolt, which is right behind this other pulley, right next to the AC compressor, another 12 millimeter. Just crack it loose so the alternator can kind of swing up. It'll make it a little easier to take the belt off if you have a new belt that doesn't stretch as much. So we'll go ahead and pull that over. As you can see, the belt gets loose when we do that. Go ahead and we'll just kind of work it over. See, it'll pop off. We don't want to lose it on the other pulley, so we're just going to kind of tuck it over here to the side, kind of out of the way. Alright, so now that we got our belt off, we can go ahead and undo the alternator connections. We'll have the red one here, which is a 12 millimeter nut we need to remove, so we can remove the cable off the top. And right down in here is a green plug. We just need to squeeze the tab, kind of give it a little wiggle and pull it out. So we'll do the tab first. Like I said, it's just a little spring clip. You hear it click there. Just got to give it a little pull wiggle it out. You can use a flat screwdriver on the side of the plug right here and wiggle it out. Don't pull it by the wires. You don't want to pull the wires out of it. Make sure you grab it by the connector. Grab a ratchet, 12mm socket, get it onto that nut, and remove it. Be careful. There is usually a lock washer or washer on there, and you don't want to lose that. So we'll go ahead and lift up slowly, and you'll see we got the nut and the bolt. We're going to set them right back on so we don't lose them, even though our new one should come with one. Alright, so now that we got the cables loosened up, we can go ahead and loosen this 12mm bolt on the lower side of our alternator bracket. We just need to loosen it. We don't need to remove it like the 2.5, as it doesn't actually go through this bracket. The bracket is notched, it kind of just slides in there. So we're going to go ahead and loosen that bolt, 12mm. Go ahead and pick up and wiggle the alternator towards the passenger side and remove it. Alright, so we'll get a 12mm wrench, put it on there, go ahead and loosen it up a few turns, and then we should be able to lift the alternator out. A ratcheting wrench works well to loosen this bolt. Once we get it loose, like I said, we'll lift up, pull towards the passenger side, and wiggle it on out. If you have trouble, you can grab a flat screwdriver, kind of pry it against the bracket to help you. Alright, so we got our alternator removed. Right there you can see the groove that lower bolt slides into when we reinstall it. Alright, next we're going to unpackage our new alternator. In this case, we're going with a junkyard alternator. It's what the customer bought. Supposedly works. So we're going to go ahead and install that. We're going to need to remove that alternator lower bolt and bracket or nut and install that on the new alternator or used alternator so we can go ahead and slide it in. If you're buying a new alternator, sometimes they come with a bolt, sometimes they don't. So make sure you check. That way if you end up breaking it or it's seized on there and won't come out, make sure you get that new bolt to make installation a little bit easier. Alright, so we snug it up just enough so the bracket won't turn. We can go ahead and slide that down inside, putting that bolt back inside the groove. You're going to have to just wiggle it around a little bit, lined up and started. You may need a flat screwdriver. Just wiggle it down and in, make sure it's in. Your bolt hole should line up when you get it pretty close to where it needs to be. Alright, now that we got the alternator back in position, we can go ahead and reconnect our plug and our lead. Make sure it clicks, pops in and locks in. We'll go ahead and remove this nut and washer. Alright, so now that we got the plug plugged back into the alternator, we heard it click, it's locked in there good. We can go ahead and reconnect our eyelet. You want to check, make sure there is no corrosion on here. If so, grab a wire brush and wire brush it off. We'll go ahead and align that. Grab our lock washer, put that on, and then our nut. Get it run down finger tight. We'll go ahead and grab our 12mm ratchet and socket and snug it down. We'll replace our boot so it can't arc out or create a short. Alright, next we're going to reinstall our 12mm bolt up top here. Go ahead and start it by hand. We don't want to run that all the way tight yet because the bracket is going to flip back into position and get held behind that screw. Alright, so we're ready to put our belt back on. We're going to grab our 14mm box wrench, put it on our tensioner, pull it to the driver's side so we can create as much slack as possible in the belt. I do find it easier to put it over AC belt pulley and put it over the alternator pulley and then slide it onto this pulley or idler here as it's smooth surface and that belt kind of slides right on. So that's what we're going to do. Pull that tensioner over here, create as much slack as we can, put it on our AC, put it on our alternator, and then slide it on this idler pulley here. Alright, so we're grabbing a 14mm box wrench, putting it on that tensioner. You also want to make sure that the belt is in all the grooves of the crank pulley and the power steering. That way you're getting as much slack as you can. Like I said, we're going to pop it off that idler down there for now. We're going to get it inside our AC. We're also going to put it around the alternator. Then we'll go ahead and pull it back. Make sure you got it on there nice and even. Alright, so when you're putting the belt back on, you want to center the belt, or if you actually can see the polished edge of where the belt was running, you want to line that up so the belt is in the same position it was. It will find its own place once you actually tighten everything up and start the vehicle. But you want to be pretty close to the center so it doesn't pop off or damage the belt. You also want to ensure you got the grooves lined up on your AC pulley, the alternator, the power steering, and the crank. You also want to make sure you have it on the other idler over here just below the power steering and alternator as well. Alright, so now that we got the belt in the center of our two idler pulleys, we ensure that it's all the way in the grooves on the 4 pulleys, the crank, AC, alternator, and the power steering. We can go ahead and grab that 12mm wrench. We'll slide it back in there and tighten that bottom alternator bracket bolt. Once we got that one tight, we can go ahead and swing our shroud or serpentine belt bracket back in position. We're going to go ahead and tighten that 12mm bolt over there and the 10mm nut. Alright, so now that we got the belt shroud or bracket back in position, we can go ahead and grab our air inlet duct. This is just going to slide over the piece in the fender. Just wiggle a little bit, it should pop right on. Should hear that little of a click. We'll go ahead and grab our 10mm bolts and reinstall them here and here. This one was broken, so we're only going to install this side. They do have a collar on them, so you may need to wiggle this around a little bit to get it to line up. Grab our 10mm ratchet and socket, snug them down. Alright, so now that we got the inlet on for our air box, we can go ahead and reinstall the engine cover if you have one, using those 4, 5, 10mm bolts. One right there, one way up there, the other one right here, and the other one right there. Alright, so once you get the cover on, you can go ahead and reconnect your battery cable. You may want to inspect your battery cables, check them for corrosion. If there is, use a battery terminal cleaner and clean it up before you reinstall it. This one's good and clean, so we're just going to go ahead and reinstall that positive cable onto the battery. Once you got it slid on, you can use that wrench to tighten it up. Give it a wiggle, make sure it doesn't wiggle around. Quick little tip, if you got a junkyard one or a used alternator or a remanufactured, you may actually want to test the output of the alternator to make sure it's properly charging your battery. You want to make sure it's not too low, and you want to make sure it's not overcharging the battery. We do have a video on how to test that. I'll try to put a link up here. That way you can test it before you go ahead and take it out on the open road. Maybe a good idea even if you got a brand new one. I've had a couple out of the box not work. So you want to go ahead and test your alternator, make sure it's functioning properly before you take it out on the road, as you will end up running on the battery only and eventually killing the battery, and you will be stranded on the side of the road. So you may want to just do a little quick test to make sure it's charging properly. So that's it. We just showed you how to install an alternator on an H6 Outback or Tribeca.
Don't forget to click the link in the description, which will take you to our website for a full write-up. You can also click that subscribe button in the middle. On the right, we have a recommended video just for you. And on the left, you'll find our recent upload. Thanks for watching another episode of the DIYguy.net.